Imagine the most powerful engine ever built for war. A 27-litre V12, so violent, so unreasonably over-engineered, that it powered the Spitfire that held the Luftwaffe back over the English Channel and saved Britain from invasion. An engine producing over 1,000 horsepower, at a time when the most powerful road cars on Earth were managing 200 horsepower. An engine so extraordinary that the greatest automotive minds in history looked at it and said, no, that belongs in an aircraft. Nobody would ever be insane enough to put that in a car. One man did, one ordinary British bloke working out of a garage with no factory, no corporate backing, no team of engineers and absolutely no permission from Rolls Royce, took the engine that won the Second World War and bolted it into a road car. A car he then drove through central London, a car he registered as a Rolls Royce, a car he eventually drove to his own court hearing with Rolls Royce's lawyers waiting inside before turning up to the next one on a white horse. This is the story of the Beast, the most powerful road car on Earth, the most outrageous vehicle ever to hold a British MOT certificate, and the most spectacular proof in automotive history that the most dangerous words in the English language are a Brit in a garage saying, "I reckon I could make that work." To understand what John Dodd built, you first need to understand what the Merlin actually was. This was not an engine that someone scaled up from a road car. The Rolls-Royce Merlin was a purpose-built weapon of war. A 60-degree aluminium V12 with 27 litres of displacement, single overhead camshafts per bank, 4 valves per cylinder, and internals machined to tolerances that most manufacturers at the time could not achieve on their best day. In the Spitfire, it produced over 1,000 horsepower with a supercharger bolted to it. It could take a Spitfire from standstill to 300 miles per hour in a matter of seconds. It ran at altitudes where the air was so thin that conventional engines simply stopped working. It was an extraordinary piece of engineering built by extraordinary people under extraordinary pressure. By the early 1970s, it was surplus to requirements, sitting in warehouses and scrapyards across Britain, a relic of a war that had ended a quarter of a century earlier. John Dodd found one, and he had a plan. Dodd himself was a transmission specialist, which turned out to be rather useful when you are trying to mate a 27-litre aero engine to a gearbox designed for something considerably smaller. The project actually began with another man, a gearbox engineer named Paul Jameson, who had built a rolling chassis around a Rolls Royce Meteor 512. The Meteor was the Merlin's less famous sibling, the non-supercharged version used in tanks during the war. Jameson needed someone to solve the transmission problem. He called Dodd. Dodd came, looked at the chassis, looked at the engine, looked at Jameson, and bought the whole thing. Over the following months, Dodd built the first beast from the ground up. He fitted a fiberglass body with a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow grille on the front because the car had a Rolls-Royce engine, and Dodd felt this was entirely reasonable. He registered the car as a Rolls-Royce because, again, Rolls-Royce engine, Rolls-Royce badge seemed perfectly logical to him. He then drove it around Britain, attracting enormous attention, enormous press coverage, and enormous irritation from Rolls-Royce, whose lawyers began sharpening their pencils. Before the lawyers could do very much, the universe intervened. On the way home from a trip to Sweden where Dodd had been invited to meet the king, the first beast caught fire somewhere on a Scandinavian roadside and burned completely to the ground. Most people would have taken this as a fairly clear sign from the cosmos. John Dodd took it as an opportunity. He rebuilt it, better this time. He replaced the Meteor tank engine with a genuine Rolls-Royce Merlin aero engine, the actual engine from a Spitfire, running on triple Weber carburetors instead of its original supercharger. He commissioned an entirely new body, the long gold shooting brake shape that the Beast still wears today. It sat impossibly low, stretched impossibly long over that enormous engine, with vents cut into the bonnet to accommodate the sheer physical size of what was underneath it. It looked like nothing else on Earth. It looked like something that had escaped from a science fiction film and somehow acquired number plates. The numbers were genuinely absurd. 0 to 70 miles per hour in 3 seconds. A verified top speed of 183 miles per hour confirmed by the RAC in 1973. Dodd claimed the engine was producing 950 horsepower. Independent estimates put it closer to 750 horsepower. Either figure was roughly twice the output of the most powerful production car available at the time. To put that into perspective, the Ferrari Daytona, considered one of the greatest performance cars of that era, produced 352 horsepower. The Beast had more than double that, in something that weighed as much as a small house, that you could drive to Tesco. In 1977, the Guinness Book of World Records made it official. The Beast was the most powerful road car on Earth. And then Rolls Royce came back with their lawyers. The trademark infringement case that followed became one of the great British automotive sideshows of the decade. Rolls Royce took exception to the grille, the Spirit of Ecstasy mascot on the bonnet, and the registration documents that listed the vehicle as a Rolls Royce. Their legal position was entirely sound. Their timing was, however, somewhat unfortunate because they were about to discover that taking John Dodd to court was considerably more complicated than they had anticipated. Dodd drove the Beast to the first hearing, through central London, in a car the length of a small yacht powered by a Spitfire engine. The press were absolutely delighted. The noise alone was enough to stop traffic. Rolls-Royce were considerably less delighted. When the judge remarked during proceedings that Dodd appeared to have a somewhat cavalier attitude toward the court, Dodd considered this feedback carefully. He then arrived at the following hearing on a white horse, an actual white horse, outside the Royal Courts of Justice in London on a Tuesday morning. This was not a man who was going to be quietly intimidated by a legal department. The court eventually found against Dodd on the trademark question. He was ordered to remove the Rolls-Royce grille and the Spirit of Ecstasy. He carried that out, replacing them with his own initials worked into a custom design. He was also effectively pressured into removing the Beast from Britain, which is how the most powerful car on Earth came to spend several years living quietly in Spain, returning to Britain once a year for its MOT, like an enormously loud migratory bird that the authorities were never quite sure what to do with. The Beast continued to make headlines throughout the 1970s and into the 80s. It appeared on BBC television multiple times. It featured in every major British motoring publication. People who heard it once never forgot it. The noise was less like a car and more like an aircraft that had not quite made it off the runway. Jeremy Clarkson inspected it on Top Gear in 1998 with the expression of a man who genuinely had not believed something like this could exist until he was standing next to it. John Dodd spent 50 years as the keeper of the Beast. He drove it, maintained it, and never once seemed to doubt that what he had created was exactly what the world needed. He died in December of 2022, aged 89. He was survived by 3 wives, 9 children, and 1 beast, which is perhaps the most perfectly British obituary it is possible to write. In 2023, the Beast was offered for public sale for the first time in its history. The estimate was between £75,000 and £100,000 for a running, driving, road-legal car with a verified top speed of 183 miles per hour, powered by the engine that won the Battle of Britain, holding the Guinness World Record for the most powerful car on Earth. This seemed like a rather modest figure. It sold for £72,500, which is less than a new family saloon from a German manufacturer that will almost certainly never appear in the Guinness Book of World Records and has never once been ridden to court on a horse. There will never be another car like the Beast, not because the engineering is beyond reach, not because the parts no longer exist, but because building something like this requires a very specific kind of person. Someone with enough technical knowledge to make it work, enough stubbornness to see it through, enough confidence to drive it to a court hearing, and enough sheer eccentricity to arrive at the next one on horseback. Britain has produced many remarkable cars, cars of extraordinary elegance, cars of genuine technical brilliance, cars that changed what the world thought a car could be. But the beast is different from all of them. The beast is not what happens when a great company with a large budget decides to build something special. The beast is what happens when one man in a garage decides that nobody gets to tell him what a car is allowed to be. And in that sense, it may be the most British car ever made.